Good morning. It's Saturday morning. Let's sew a woven pullover top today. I chose the pattern of the one I'm wearing. We won't have to sew any closures on this. We're gonna have to set in some sleeves. We can do that, no problem. And we'll make a little bias binding out of the fashion fabric to finish our neckline. We've got a pleat in the back. I'm gonna show you the pattern, and then I'm gonna show you how I choose some fabric. To be honest, I haven't chosen any fabric for this yet. So come on along and let's go. Hold on. I thought it would be fun to work with Simplicity 8556 today. And I have made this tunic. I love the fit of it. I chose quilting cotton. If you have some cotton to use up, this little tunic is a great choice for that. So, if I were to pick a pattern like I've done here, and then think, well, what am I going to make this out of? There's the man of the house making breakfast. I would walk in here to my studio. Now, you know I have those glass fabric storage towers, but look at this. I had to add auxiliary fabric storage. Who, me? I know you're shocked, but here it is. I was able to fit a little bit more in there, and I've got some in the dining room hutch behind me, and I've got some, well, never mind. So, let's pick some fabric for this tunic. The last time I made the tunic, I made it out of quilting cotton, and I think I'm gonna come over here to my wovens. They go all the way down there. They're in the bottom half of this storage tower. But my eye is falling on the Egyptian Dogs Rayon Challis. This is jumping out at me. I ordered this fabric from Mood, like 3.5 yards, and it arrived in several pieces, which I didn't know at the time. However, I think that I can make this top. I think I can cut it out of my pieces, and that's my choice. When I choose a fabric, I choose it and I go. I don't stand here and go, well, no, maybe this, maybe that. I just pick it and I go. I don't second guess it. I do have some projects in the works over there, so sorry about that mess. Here's my junk box behind my sewing machine, and my scissors are at the ready. I actually have 2 copies of this pattern because if one is good, 2 are better. Is Rayon Challis a difficult fabric to work with? I don't think it is. Now, the complaint is that it slides around and you can't control it, it frays, and it's super thin. Well, all of those things are true, but I don't think it's a deal breaker. You might want to try a little bit of spray starch when you are ironing out your Rayon Challis. You also want to use a fairly high heat on your iron. A little steam is just fine. I've got one of those irons that, you know, you can spit some steam out here and there. So I would recommend that. This top that we're going to make today, it does have bust darts. It's got a little split here on the side. The back is slightly longer. If you're getting tired of that trend, you can change it and you can cut the back even with the front. Let's cut our large pieces first. We have 2 pieces that are cut on the fold. So it helps to take your fabric and fold it in from each side. Your selvages will meet, and then you have 2 folds to work with. All right, here's the sleeve, and this is a point worth making. When you are laying your pattern pieces on top of your fabric, you'll see that grain line. It's an arrow, okay? And you want that to be equidistant from your fold. So I usually eyeball it, but if you want to be precise, you can take a ruler, which I will now go get. You can use a ruler, you can use a measuring tape. Let's see how well I got this sleeve. We're gonna start at the line here and measure to the fold. I've got just about 11, move down here, and I've got 11. So I know that, I guess that means I'm on grain. Just thought I would mention that. That's a good practice to get into when you're laying out your pattern pieces. Here is your neck binding piece. It's a long, narrow piece that we want to cut. But look, there's your grain arrow, and it is on a diagonal. That's important. You definitely want to honor that, and you want to place it on your fabric at a diagonal so that your grain line is running parallel to your selvage. Now, despite the fact that I have pressed this rayon challis and spray starched it, you can see the little ripples in it. It's not gonna lie perfectly flat for you like cotton would, but press on. It's okay to have a little bit of ripples in there. You can just spread things out under your pattern piece. Just make sure that that little grain line, it's very small on there, but you've got to look for it. And your neck bindings are always going to be cut on the bias because they need a little bit of give when you attach them to the neck. Necklines are often round, and so you're fitting something in a circle, and when you have it cut on the bias, you're going to have a little bit of stretch in there, even with your woven fabrics. I am not going to sew every bit of this pattern with you on camera. I have faith in you that you can sew the shoulder seams and you can do the front or the side seams. I'm going to show you what might be construed as a little trickier to do. Wanted to say one more thing about the neckband. After you cut it out, you're going to see that it has places to mark. These little circles are typically where you mark your fabric. And I happen to know that those little circles are going to be placed, I believe, at the shoulder seams on your neck binding. Instead of doing the tailor tacks like I used to do, now all I do is make a little clip. I find where that is. There's the little circles. I find my size, and then I just simply make a, can I see it? Yes, I can see it. I just make a teeny little clip. See that in the fabric? Then I know that that's where I'm gonna match it up to the shoulder seam. And I'll tell you what, it's just a lot neater than tailor tacks, because tailor tacks, oh, all those little threads, you gotta get them out. They almost get in the way rather than help. So just make a couple little snips in your fabric there at those, where'd they go? Yeah, at these little markings here. Okay, just make a little snip and then it's marked. Well, let's get on with things. The first instructions are always going to be stay stitching and or make your darts. This shirt has a dart. First of all, mark the ends of your dart legs by making a tiny little clip in the side of your fabric. Okay, then this is the dart point, of course, here in the center of your garment. Sometimes I'll move mine down, not much, maybe ½ inch. So I do that by placing my ruler on there and moving the dart point down 1/2 inch. making a new point. And marking the new point, which I typically do with needle and thread. So I'm just going to go in there right where my new point is. And I have marked it. I have my dart legs cut in. They're leading to a slightly lower point. Now I don't move it way, way down. I only moved it ½ inch. And then I have marked that point with a little thread tack right there. What I usually do is, after all this careful marking, I just pull the pieces apart and the thread tack is 100% lost. So don't do that. You can go ahead and take your pattern piece apart. You'll see another marking here, a little circle where they want you to put in the split at the hemline. So if you would like to mark that, by all means do it. I will just kind of come back to it for reference, and I don't feel that I have to mark my fabric. So remove your pins and let's get that dart in. Hello. Okay, I've put my front pattern piece up to me. I don't think I moved the dart points down on my last shirt. So now I may have made them too low, but I just, you know, it doesn't matter to me that much. Right side, wrong side. We're gonna make our darts on the wrong side. So we're gonna fold our fabric and match up those little cuts we put in from the dart legs. They are completely matched up, and we stick a pin in there to hold them in place. I usually do not use any pin for darts, but I will just show you to hopefully make it clearer. Then we're going to find the point where I marked it with, can you see that thread sticking out? That's the tailor's tack to mark the dart point. I fold my fabric, matching up those two little cuts at the edge, and then I pinch it there at the end. That's my dart. Under the machine, I place the edge with those matched up dart legs and lower my needle. I hold where the dart ends, and then I begin to sew. I back tack at the beginning because I want that stitch locked in. I'm still holding where that dart point ends, and I just sew along, bringing it along. Right off the edge where the dart ends. It's very hard to show you this with the light on. I've ended right where that tack is. And now what I do, I have to turn the machine on. I don't cut my thread here. I just needle up and I pull it out to give myself something to tie. You don't want to back stitch at that dart point because it could make a little bubble. And that's the last place we want a bubble on our garment. So pull it out. You can now take that little tailor tack marking out. Get rid of those. And then where you've given yourself something to tie, you're just going to tie off a knot by hand. Just tie those two threads together once, twice, 3 times a lady. Okay, once, twice, and cut. Our dart has been sewn. Now we're going to press it. It's important to press them because you want them to have a nice clean finish on the front. Let's hold this the right way up. Okay, we're going to press the dart down. You can press the dart up. I suggest you follow your fabric's lead. If it wants to go up, press it up. If it wants to go down, press it down. Now, let's see if that's gonna be, yeah, that should be right on, just about right. So, to reiterate, take your fabric on the wrong side. Match up your little cuts that you made on the edge. Right sides together, match up those little nicks in the fabric. Find your point of the dart right there and hold it. Put it in your machine and sew a gentle triangle coming off the fabric right at that point. Needle up, pull it out, tie it once, twice, cut it, and press. A word about stay stitching. Some people hate it. I generally do it if they instruct me to, but it really irks me when you do it and then it shows and they haven't told you how far to sew from the edge. This neck binding is going to attach in a 3/8 inch seam, so your stay stitching needs to be just a 1/4 inch from the edge so that it doesn't show. I would recommend that you put it in because your neckline can stretch out. I know there are some folks who ignore stay stitching and they probably do just fine, but I'm going to put it in. I have rayon challis fabric, which is not terribly stable, and the neckline moves around a lot and it can kind of stretch out. So I'm going to put it in and I'm only going to stitch 1/4 inch from the edge. I just thought I'd mention that so that you don't put in your stay stitching a 1/2 inch from the edge and then the whole thing shows. Oh, that's so annoying. Okay, I'm following the order of operations, which brings us to our yoke. We are going to stay stitch a mere 1/4 inch from those edges. Then we're going to attach our yoke. Oh boy, once again it says cut 1 and I cut 2. I can't help it. And you'll be able to see when we attach our yoke to the upper edge of our back where we made our little pleat, you'll be able to know if your pleat is the right width by the fact that your yoke needs to fit there, matching up those notches and being equal or equivalent to the edges. And then we're going to sew our little yoke onto the back, and when we flip it up it'll look really cute. So let's pin our yoke and sew it on. Since I'm working with rayon challis and it does fray like crazy, I've got my yoke sewn on there, and this is going to form the back of our shirt. But I am going to serge that edge. If you do not have a serger, that's okay. You can pink it, you can overcast it. But if you can scrape together $150, $200, look at this, done. Now I have an enclosed edge. I'm going to press that toward the yoke, and I don't have to worry about that fraying. But again, a serger is not something you have to have. You can pink it. I have beautiful pinking shears that came from that old woman, Molly, who passed away, and I got her sewing stuff. And these are Wiss Made in the USA pinking shears. They're as sharp as can be, and I use them a lot because you don't always want to serge. It's a little bit noisy. Could you tell? All right, let's go press our yoke. Yoke seam up toward the yoke. It's time to work with the neck binding. You're going to make sure you made those little clips in your edges, okay, where the dots are. If you prefer to mark them with a marking pen or tailor's tacks, that's fine. Sewing is a lot about preferences too. There are many ways up the mountain and there are many preferences. So do what's true to you. Then you're going to take your neck binding and you're going to sew the right sides together at this seam, and then you're going to have a circle. All right? And I'll come back and show you what to do after you've sewn it together in a circle. Right sides together. All right, we're going to press under 1/4 inch on our neck binding on the side that does not have the markings. So by markings, they mean those little clips, notches that you put in your fabric. Mine are very tiny and a little bit hard to see, but you can find where you made the markings, and you're going to press under 1/4 inch on the opposite side of those markings. So take your iron, turn up a mere 1/4 inch, and just press around all the way around your neck binding. You have connected your fronts and your backs, forming a neck hole. There it is with the stay stitching. You have also made your binding. You have connected it together, right sides, and you've sewn a 5/8 inch seam. I went ahead and pinked mine. And then you went and you folded in 1/4 inch and pressed all the way around your binding. Now you're going to turn your garment right side out, and you're going to attach this neck binding right sides together. Okay? Now, probably I should have marked centers and whatnot, and if you did that, you are a rock star. I only marked those little notches to match up to my shoulder seam. So here's my shoulder seam, and here's my little notch, and I'm going to pin that right sides together, making sure that the edges are even. And I will put a pin there, and I will come over to the other shoulder seam, make sure that I'm not getting my neck binding all twisted. I'll find the other shoulder seam, here it is, and I'll find the other little notch in my neck binding, there it is, and I'll match those up and put a pin in there. Now I will just, now that it's anchored on either side, I'm just going to go around and pin it all the way around the neck edge. Those two edges will be even, and you're going to place a pin every couple of inches. I like to work in from each side, so I'll go pin one side and then I'll come to the other and pin it. And again, we are just attaching that neck binding to the front of our shirt. It should match exactly. You should not have gaps in either the neck binding or the shirt. If things are not coming up evenly and you're having to pull or tuck things, then something might have gotten stretched out. Either your neckline or your binding. You can adjust. You can adjust that neckline, that neck binding to fit if it is just misbehaving horribly. So how would you do that? Well, you would make it smaller by taking up a larger seam allowance here where you sewed it together. You would just take up a little bit more. Or if you needed more room with the neck binding, you could take this seam out and make it smaller. Hopefully though, since you put in your stay stitching, everything will match nicely. And we just go around and attach that binding, pinning from one side, coming in from the other. Edges are even. And we're done. Our neck binding has been put on to our garment. Do one final check to make sure those right sides are together. And your little fold should be right there. So there's your raw edge, and there's your little fold. We're going to go to the sewing machine and just simply sew on the binding. We don't need to stretch, we don't need to pull. We're just gonna sew a straight stitch in a 3/8 inch seam. It's a smaller seam because it's easier to turn on a curve when you have a smaller width seam. So let's go put it on. I like to take off that free arm, if you can do that. And we'll just drape our neck edge right over that free arm so that we have a flat surface. Nice, clean, flat surface. I like to start at that back seam. We're gonna do a smaller 3/8 inch seam. Now, you might note that the instructions say stretching to fit, if you need to stretch that little neckline to fit, and that's why we cut it on the bias, remember? So there is a little bit of give to it, and you might not have to change the size of it if it's coming up a teeny bit short, because you can always get a little bit of stretch with anything cut on the bias. But mine came out okay. I didn't really have to fiddle with resizing it or really even stretching it to fit. It's just kind of going on there quite well. And I'm just going around in a 3/8 inch seam. I'm making sure that my edges are even. Straight stitch, no prob. I'm sewing right over my pins. I want them in there. Now I know that that may offend the sensibilities of some people, and that's okay. Again, we've got these preferences. I know it's prudent to take them out, so I will make an effort to take them out. And there have been horror stories of pins flying up in people's faces, and I don't like to hear that. I certainly hope that has never happened to any of you. We don't want it to, so safety first. However, I'm not gonna lie to you. I sew over a lot of pins. All right, we're just going around in our circle, making sure that our fabric on the bottom is smooth. We're not sewing any tucks. We're not sewing any jagged lines or anything like that. It's just a straight up attach one piece of fabric to another until we get back to the beginning, and then we're going to back tack it to lock it in. And now our neck, don't look at those pins. Now our neck binding has been attached, and it was not that painful. Now we're almost done. We still have that little fold there to deal with. You can see what's coming though. Simplicity does not instruct you to clip the curves on this neck binding, but that is something I like to do. So grab a nice sharp pair of scissors. If I can get a hold of this fabric. And you can just put in some little clips to, I think it helps to make the neck binding lie nice and flat. when you have a little bit of clipping on the curves. However, we did only do a 3/8 inch seam, and that's going to go a long way toward a smooth finish without having to trim your seam or anything like that. So I've gone ahead and put in a few little curve clips, and now we are going to turn that neck binding to the inside. And what it's going to do, oh, I know. First we have to press out the seam toward the neck binding, okay? So if you can see what I'm doing here, I'm on the inside of the garment and I'm pressing that little 3/8 inch seam that we just made toward the neck binding. So let's go around and press that out. Press right there on that seam line. Oops, press it out. Not in, press it out toward the neck binding. One thing about rayon that's nice is that it usually holds a beautiful press. So we can forgive its eccentricities because it will hold a press for us, and that really helps. That makes things go well in sewing. Well, once you've gone all the way around and pressed that seam toward the neck binding, then it's just a natural progression to turn the binding in and enclose the seam. So here's your little fold, and here's your seam that you've pressed toward the neck, and you're going to fold it in and enclose it just like that to have a clean finish on the inside and a nice little bit of your binding showing on the outside. So let's do that. Your iron will help you. Fold it in, cover the seam, and press and pin. Press and pin, press and pin. I hear sirens. I don't know if you can hear them. I hear sirens all day long. It's kind of troubling. Okay, turn it in, cover that seam, press her down. And what's happening is you're getting this nice finish on the inside and you're getting a pretty neck binding on the outside. So I'm just going to go along and keep turning in my binding, pressing it down and pinning for the final top stitching. Well, how'd you do? Did you turn it and press it? I also used my ham to help me with that. So if it looks reasonably even to you on the outside, go ahead and press it down, and we are going to go to the sewing machine. Now, top stitching, you know, you sew on the outside. So I kind of do a cheater's top stitch wherein I sew on the inside so that I can make sure I've caught that little fold, and it gives me stitching that shows on the outside, but not in a bad way. Well, let's see how we do. The main thing I want to do when I'm sewing from the inside, which will show on the outside, is to pay very close attention to how far I am from the edge, so that on the outside my stitching is going to be completely equidistant from the edge all the way around. Here's what you need to know about sleeves. Set-in sleeves have a great big hump. Now, we can debate all day long whether that level of hump is necessary or not. If you want to change your sleeve cap feel free to do so. However, the pattern will work with the way it's drafted. We just have to get a little bit creative about putting this sleeve cap into our garment. The first thing I do is I snip up here. I put in one of those little triangle snip outs of where the top of the sleeve is. Then I know that a double notch denotes the back of the sleeve. A single notch denotes the front of the sleeve. But before we put these sleeves into our shirt, we are going to finish this sleeve. The first thing we're going to do is ease our sleeve cap. And the way we do that is the pattern will instruct you to sew 2 lines of basting stitching at the top of your sleeve so that you can then pull the bobbin threads and gently gather your sleeve to make it fit in the hole. What I like to do is something called crimping. It takes the place of those basting stitches, but it's similar. You only put in 1 line of stitching and you hold your finger behind the presser foot and it gently gathers the fabric and makes them magically fit into the armholes. I'm going to put my sleeve under the presser foot and I'm going to insert my crimping between the notches. So the single notch in the front and the double notch in the back. I'm also going to put it just inside the 5/8 inch seam line. All right, so my finger is behind and I'm going to begin stitching. And I'm not going to let that fabric go anywhere. I'm just going to keep my finger there. I'm going to guide with my other hand over here to keep it inside that stitch line. And when I feel like I just can't hold it any longer, I'll let my finger go. Then I will replace it and continue up and around the sleeve cap. Let it go. Replace it. Guide the fabric. We're easing up around the crown where we have our little notch cut out. Let it go. Replace the finger. Around the Johnny corner. And down the other side to the notch. Now, when I'm done, I don't cut it, I needle up, and I'm going to pull my fabric out and give myself some thread tails so that if I need to adjust the stitches while I'm inserting the sleeve, I can. But look what I've got. I've got this beautifully gathered sleeve cap. And that is what you get with crimping. It just pulls the fabric together and that, you know, that's over your shoulder like that, and you can insert it without any tucks. So I highly recommend this method for putting in your sleeves. I'm going to do it to the other sleeve and then we'll put the sleeves in. Now, remember, sleeve attachment time means that your sleeves are 100% done. They are sewn together at the underarm seam and they are hemmed. I just put a narrow hem on my sleeve. And I might attach some trim to it. I haven't decided. At any rate, the sleeve needs to be done because that's going to make your life so much easier. You don't want to be fussing with hemming a sleeve after it's already attached to your garment. Your garment needs to be inside out. Your sleeves need to be right side out. You are going to find your armhole. There it is. And you're going to drop your sleeve inside it. Just drop it in there. Try and get this on here so it makes sense. Once your sleeve is in there, what I like to do is first match up the underarm seam, right side to right side, underarm seam, find it, and pin it. You might be a notch matcher of sleeves and you might not be. I am, for the most part. So I'm going to find my double notch. That's going to be the back of my garment. I'm going to match those up and I'm going to pin them. Then I'm going to come over, oops. Then I'm going to come over here to the front and find the little single notch. I'm going to match that up and I'm going to pin that. So those are the 3 points of anchor for me that I do with a set-in sleeve. I do the underarm seam and the notches. Then I come to the very top where the shoulder seam is, and I should have that little notch cut out of my sleeve cap, the crown of my sleeve, and I'm going to match that up to my shoulder seam, and you guessed it, pin it. Now all I have to do is get the edges in, and remember how I crimped it? Well, look how beautifully they're going to fit. So I just take a little bit at a time and pin. A little bit at a time, making sure those edges are perfectly even, and pin. About 3 pins between the notch and the shoulder seam. If you want to use more pins, you do exactly as you would like to. Now, here's the back part. There's our little yoke seam, and we're just going to fit the sleeve right in there. And again, that crimping helps us so very much. So we'll just match a little bit and pin. Match a little bit and pin. And then right there at that yoke, we'll pull it up to make sure the edges are even and pin. I did not even need to adjust those crimping stitches to get this sleeve to fit. You can see them in there where they're ridged, but you're not even going to get tucks because it's going to be perfectly flat when you sew it. So pin your sleeves in and then baste them in. Baste them in. It's a good practice to get into. I no longer, full disclosure, I no longer baste in my sleeves, but I have also sewn quite a few of these. Did I tell you all that I made 96 garments last year? And I'm on track to beat that this year. So I recommend that you baste that in, unless you know you can get it in. Put in a basting stitch. It takes about 5 minutes, and hand stitching is very calming. Go ahead and do it. Then you're going to take it to the machine and sew it in. I sew it in with the sleeve up. That is a preference. You can also sew it in with the sleeve down. Let's do it. We're going to take that free arm off, of course. We're going to start, I like to start on the back of the sleeve. Put it under your machine so that you have a 5/8 inch seam. I know you cannot see this. Hold on one sec. So you're going to put your sleeve under there, matching up at the 5/8 inch seam line, and that's what you're going to sew all the way around. Now, when you're putting in that sleeve, you're going to want to keep handling the garment. So you're going up around curves, and what I want you to do is keep picking it up and smoothing it out under there, okay? So that you don't catch anything that you don't want to catch, and that you can keep in this nice circular motion. So now we're just going to go up here, pick it up, adjust. Make sure that everything feels real smooth. There's nothing underneath there. Oops, there's my pens. Now you see them. I'm going to hear from the sewing police, and they are not going to be pleased with me. They will be writing me a citation. Are they right? Well, maybe they are. Go ahead and pick your garment up, flip it around, make it compliant, because remember, you're in charge, not the garment, you. So use your machine to your advantage. You can lift the presser foot up and down to get some good position there. And again, you're going to be using your fingers to feel that nothing is under there that you don't want under there. Starts to curl a little bit, lift up that presser foot and straighten her out. And come on around the corner. Well, no corners. Come on around the top. Flip her around so that you've got a nice flat surface. You want those edges to be even. We pinned them and you basted them. Sew a little bit, reposition. Line up, feel. Sew a little bit, reposition. Smooth. And guess what? You are back to where you started. Run a backing stitch to lock her in. Take it out. When you take your sleeve out, what you're going to want to do, look away, please. Please look away. Look at that blue sky out there. Isn't it amazing? Quickly get these pins out. When you take your sleeve out, what you will want to do before you serge it or pink it or do the next step is just turn it inside out and check. Do I have any tucks? Now you might have little wrinkles. That's okay, because you've sewn this tricky round sewing, and the wrinkles you can steam out, but what you don't want are out and out tucks. You've got some crimping threads sticking out. Just clip those off. You want to make sure that everything is smooth. There's another crimping thread that can get lost. Goodbye. Thank you for your help. And if everything looks pretty smooth like that, you've got a successful sleeve. You're going to press it after you finish this seam off. You can serge it, you can pink it, you can overcast it, and then you're going to press it toward the sleeve. It has been less than 3 hours since I cut this out, and I've got a new top. Now, what did I do with the hem? I didn't want mine to be a high-low, so I chopped it off to be all the same. All I've done here is put in a serged edge, because I might want to add some trim to it, like I mentioned earlier. The shirt is, for all intents and purposes, done. We have sleeves, 3/4 sleeves. We set them in. We have darts for better fitting. We have a lovely scoop neck, and we have self fabric binding. We have that little pleat in the back that we made and a yoke detail. And if you're going to follow the directions, you can have a high-low hem with those cute little splits on the sides. Now, does this video take the place of a sewing class? No. This video is to show you how I would construct a casual top that I'm gonna wear to watch March Madness, maybe do some grocery shopping, go out to lunch, meet my sister for coffee. Just a casual, easy to wear top. I'm not meeting the queen. I just want something new to wear. So I encourage you to keep sewing. How do you get better? You keep sewing. How do you get more confident? You keep sewing. Thank you for joining me today, and I'm clapping for you. You did it. Happy sewing until we meet again. This is Viv Mom signing off. Bye.